Welcome. Today we're going to be exploring a profound paradox, the life of James Joseph Brown.
He was the man who, you could argue he literally invented funk.
Right, the progenitor of so much modern rhythmic music, the figure known as Mr. Dynamite and the godfather of soul.
But the magnitude of his influence is, well, it's really only rivaled by the sheer complexity of his life. For over 50 years, his career spanned and shaped R&B, soul, and funk.
And in doing so, created a sonic blueprint that, continues to dominate music today. He is, without a doubt, the world's most sampled recording artist.
Unequivocally.
Our mission today is an exploration of that monumental figure, all is detailed in the source material you provided. And we have to achieve a necessary balance here.
It's about celebrating his explosive artistic contributions while also grappling with the turbulent, often problematic, and incredibly complex reality of his personal and legal history.
And we should be clear, we've pulled this analysis entirely from one massive, extensive source that tracks his entire sprawling career.
To understand the global icon, the man who demanded perfection and redefined rhythm, we really have to start at the absolute bottom.
It's an exploration of how a life that was built on chaos and poverty produced an art form that was built on absolute, relentless control.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this history, starting with those incredibly harsh beginnings. James Joseph Brown was born on May 3, 1933, in Barnwell, South Carolina.
And the source material paints a picture of just intense, immediate hardship.
Abject poverty really defines his start.
It does. His mother, Susie Belling, was quite young, only 16, and his father, Joseph Gardner Brown, was 21.
The family history is noted as being ethnically complex even then. His mother was mixed race, African-American and Asian.
Well, his father was African-American and Native American, so there's a lot going on right from the start.
And the complications began immediately, right down to his identity.
With his name.
Exactly. His parents intended to name him Joseph James Brown, but a simple mistake during the certification process. It got reversed.
So James Joseph Brown was essentially misnamed from the moment he entered the world.
They lived in Elko, South Carolina for the first few years. But around the age of 4 or 5, they relocated to Augusta, Georgia.
And this is where the environment becomes truly formative and intensely difficult. They settled in brothels and shared homes run by his aunts.
Just a completely unstable, volatile existence for a child.
In adding to that instability, the source notes that his home life was turbulent and contentious.
This all culminated in his mother leaving the family. The marriage was described in the sources as abusive.
This is such a crucial foundation, isn't it? The man who would demand absolute loyalty and perfection from his band came from a place of profound disarray.
It absolutely is. When you look at his relentless drive, you see someone who had to fight for every single inch of stability.
And that fight started early, manifesting in the first glimpses of the performer.
He was performing essentially for survival.
For survival. The first documented stage victory came in 1944. He was only 11 years old.
He won a talent show at Augustus Lenox Theater, singing the ballad So Long, just a tiny crack of light in his world.
But performing wasn't confined to the stage. During World War II, his aunt's home was near Camp Gordon, and military convoys often passed by.
So Brown would perform what were called buck dances for change for the passing troops.
Highly transactional, early performance for profit. And it was around this time that he heard the legendary blues musician Howlin' Wolf playing guitar in the area.
So he was soaking up R&B and the rawest forms of blues, learning to play piano, guitar, and harmonica himself.
He was especially inspired by the jump blues and R&B sounds of Louis Jordan and his Timpani Five, specifically their song Caledonia.
This period also shows his immense versatility. He briefly pursued a career as a boxer before committing fully to music.
That combination of intense physical discipline, early exposure to performance as survival, and the influence of these powerful R&B and blues figures, that creates the core of the man.
But before music offered redemption, the path took a definitive, dark turn.
Yes. His life of poverty and minimal education, he was forced to drop out in the 7th grade, led him directly to early criminality.
At the age of just 16, he was convicted of robbery and sentenced to a juvenile detention center in Toko.
That sentence was a turning point. While incarcerated, he formed a gospel quartet with fellow cellmates, one of whom was Johnny Terry.
The singing was a continuation of that survival instinct, offering connection and a distraction from the harshness of the system.
And the most pivotal encounter of his early career happened during his incarceration.
Meeting Bobby Bird.
Meeting Bobby Bird outside the detention center during a baseball game. Bird's connection, and more specifically his family's support, became the key to Brown's freedom.
That's right. Bird and his family helped secure Brown's early parole, which was granted on June 14, 1952.
But the condition of his release was significant, the promise that he would sing for the Lord. It linked his freedom directly to his musical commitment.
He also secured his release through a work sponsorship, promising to work for 2 years under a Toko business owner, S.C. Lawson, who was reportedly impressed by Brown's work ethic.
It's a crucial narrative. He literally used his innate talent and survival skills to sing his way out of jail and into a music group with the very family that vouched for him.
It creates a foundational principle for his entire career. He escaped the chaos of his early life through music, but only by submitting to an almost military level of self-imposed discipline.
And an adherence to a work ethic that was truly unmatched. His art was fundamentally linked to his survival and his redemption.
And that story of redemption leads us directly into the formation of the musical force. In 1954, Brown joined Bobby Bird's group.
It was a fluid entity at first. Started as the Gospel Starlighters, briefly became the Avons, and then eventually solidified into the Famous Flames.
The Famous Flames quickly earned a reputation, building on the R&B vocal group tradition. They took a lot of inspiration from acts like Hank Ballard and the Midnighters.
Their hallmark was their dynamic live shows. They were blending these gospel-tinged vocals with sharp, polished choreography and just impeccable timing.
They toured relentlessly, honing the act. Their first major breakthrough track has that classic industry anecdote surrounding it.
Right. While performing in Macon, they met Little Richard, who convinced them to reach out to his manager, Clint Brantley.
And during a demo session in 1956, they recorded Please, Please, Please.
The song itself was inspired by Brown seeing Little Richard write that phrase on a napkin and being instantly determined to turn it into a track.
And that determination paid off massively. Please, Please, Please sold over 1 million copies.
It secured their contract with Federal, which was a subsidiary of King Records. While follow-ups initially struggled, Brown demonstrated his business sense by changing management in 1957.
The next major success came in 1958 with the release of the ballad, Try Me.
And this track shot straight to #1 on the R&B chart in early 1959. It wasn't just a hit. It marked the first of 17 chart-topping R&B hits Brown would ultimately score.
What's significant here, even this early, is the complex, almost bifurcated structure of his band. By 1960, Brown was already operating 2 distinct musical entities.
You had the Famous Flames, who were the vocal group, and then a separate backing group, sometimes referred to as the James Brown Orchestra or Band.
And that desire for absolute control extended to his output.
Absolutely. The source notes that they were forced to release a hit, Do the Mashed Potatoes, under a pseudonym, Nat Kendrick and the Swans, because of label issues.
The fact that he was already navigating label politics, creating side projects, and managing 2 distinct sets of performers in his mid-20s shows a remarkable singular focus.
And that singular vision defined the Mr. Dynamite era and his biggest early risk. In 1962, Brown made a massive financial and professional gamble.
He personally financed a live recording of a performance at the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem.
King Records president Sid Nathan was strongly against it. He believed, logically, that the market wouldn't buy a live album from an artist whose singles they had already purchased. He was highly skeptical.
Brown had to convince him, pushing relentlessly for the release.
And the resulting album, Live at the Apollo, released in June 1963, completely defied expectations. It was an immediate cultural sensation.
It proved that Brown's power was uniquely captured in performance. It reached #2 on the top LPs chart, sold over 1 million copies, and stayed on the charts for an astonishing 14 months.
It introduced his raw energy to a completely new mainstream audience.
The genius of that album lies in its pacing. It wasn't just a collection of hits, it was a curated journey through his intensity.
Exactly. The source details how Brown and the Flames opened the set with high-energy rhythm tracks like I'll Go Crazy, but then transitioned into powerful emotional ballads like Try Me and You've Got the Power,
showing his range before building back to a frenzy.
The momentum from that was unstoppable. He scored his first top 20 pop hit with his cover of the standard Prisoner of Love.
But the moment that solidified his national cross-genre profile was the TAMI show in 1964.
This was a legendary concert film featuring the biggest acts of the day. And Brown and the Famous Flames delivered what the source describes as an explosive, show-stopping performance.
Their high-octane singing, gospel-tinged vocals, and dynamic choreography were so dominant that the planned closing act, The Rolling Stones were effectively upstaged.
That's a truly fascinating moment in rock history, the new British invasion being momentarily overshadowed by the sheer physical force of Brown's developing R&B soul sound.
And the hits just kept coming after that. 1965 was arguably his peak crossover year.
Papa's Got a Brand New Bag became his first top 10 pop hit and won him his first Grammy Award.
Then came the instant classics I Gotcha, I Feel Good, and the epic ballad, It's a Man's World.
That ballad in particular hit #1 on the R&B chart and top 10 pop. It made him an undeniable cultural force.
But as successful as the soul ballads were, Brown wasn't content to remain in that lane.
No. This takes us to the truly revolutionary period, starting around 1967, the undisputed birth of funk and the rise of Soul Brother #1.
This was not an incremental change. This was a fundamental re-engineering of popular music.
Brown's sound moved away from the traditional blues and gospel structures towards something entirely focused on rhythm. And critics agree that Cold Sweat, released in 1967, was the first true funk song.
Let's break down why it was so revolutionary, because the source material provides clear technical insights.
Well, Cold Sweat was one of his earliest recordings to feature a drum break prominently. And crucially, it reduced the harmony to a single chord, maintaining that one chord throughout the song.
And why is reducing the harmony such a radical move?
In traditional R&B and soul, harmony and melody typically define the structure and emotion. By reducing the harmonic complexity to just one chord, Brown was stripping away the conventional signposts.
He forced the listener to focus entirely on the rhythmic pulse, what he famously called the one.
The first beat of the measure. Exactly. Everything revolved around locking into that downbeat.
So the magic wasn't in what they were playing, but when and how they were hitting it.
Precisely. This new funk style was based on interlocking syncopated parts. Think of it as a rhythmic machine where every musician plays a small, precise, repetitive role.
You had the strutting, complex bass lines, the syncopated, propulsive drum patterns provided by masters like John Jabo Starks and Clyde Stubblefield.
And the iconic percussive guitar riffs supplied by Jimmy Nolan.
And the guitar, in particular, ceases to be a melodic instrument and becomes purely rhythmic. It's just a rhythmic chop.
Exactly. The writer Alexander Stewart noted that Brown refined the New Orleans funk feel, creating these absolutely irresistible, danceable riffs that emphasized the attack points when the note was played, more than the actual pitch of the note.
This is the essence of funk. It created tracks like Give It Up or Turn It Loose, and the monumental Funky Drummer, recorded in 1969.
And this focus on rhythmic essence explains why, decades later, Brown remains the sampling king.
His tracks from this 1967-1970 period, particularly the drum breaks from Funky Drummer, were resurrected by countless hip-hop musicians starting in the 1970s.
They are the foundational documents of modern music production.
The influence wasn't just instrumental either. It extended to his vocal delivery.
That's right. Brown's style was rhythmic declamation, that highly energetic, not quite sung, not quite spoken delivery, punctuated by his expressive shrieks and famous grunts.
This provided the template for the flow, rhythm, and attack points used by early hip-hop MCs.
It's why the drum break from Funky Drummer was later recognized as the national anthem of hip-hop.
And while he was innovating musically, he was simultaneously building a business empire. By the late 1960s, Brown acquired radio stations.
Which is such a powerful full-circle moment. He acquired WRDW in his native Augusta, the very city where he had been shining shoes and sleeping in brothels as a boy.
He changed the call letters of a station in Knoxville to WJBE, reflecting his initials, and broadcast a raw soul format. He also purchased WABU in Baltimore.
This was not just about music. It was about media ownership and economic power within the Black community.
And we have to acknowledge the caliber of talent he managed to attract and lead during this revolutionary time. People like Alfred Pee Wee Ellis, Maceo Parker, Fred Wesley, Bobby Byrd.
These were musicians steeped in jazz and R&B, and they executed Brown's vision of blending R&B drive with jazz's rhythmic complexity.
The music was raw, stripped down, but the execution was absolutely professional.
It had to be, because the system he built to produce it was utterly unforgiving.
The genius was certainly in the studio, but the legend of James Brown, the hardest working man in show business, was absolutely cemented on the road.
The sheer spectacle of the live show was a defining feature of his career.
It was a religious event.
It was. The performance always began with the elaborate MC introduction, often delivered by longtime MC Danny Ray or, famously, Fats Gonder, whose voice is immortalized on Live at the Apollo.
The intro was a cascade of titles, often with a drum roll, listing Mr. Dynamite, Soul Brother Number 1, and a rapid-fire sequence of hits like Try Me and Night Train.
The opening words of the Apollo album intro set the tone. So now, ladies and gentlemen, it is star time. It was designed to hype the crowd to an almost unbearable pitch before he even stepped on stage.
And Brown's goal was simple, but brutally physical. To give people more than what they came for, make them tired.
He was the epitome of intensity. His performance repertoire focused on hits and recent songs, mixed with a few R&B covers, all delivered at a relentless pace.
The physical element was paramount. He incorporated strenuous dance moves, including the mashed potato, dramatic leaps, splits, and slides, all while singing in that forceful shout style derived from his gospel roots.
And visually, the revue was disciplined. Even long after it was fashionable, the male performers in the James Brown Revue, which could include 40 or 50 people, were required to wear full tuxedos and cummerbunds.
This huge, relentless operation performed sometimes upwards of 330 shows a year.
Nearly all of them one-nighters. To sustain that, every moment had to be high-impact, polished, and synchronized.
And the ultimate moment of theater was the Cape routine, typically performed during Please, Please, Please.
It was pure, distilled showmanship. Brown would drop to his knees, totally spent, clutching the microphone stand.
And the MC, Danny Ray, would rush out with a cape, drape it over Brown's shoulders, and begin to escort him off stage.
All while the famous Flames continued the anguished background vocal, "Please, please don't go."
The audience, of course, would plead with him to stay, but the collapse was always temporary.
He would dramatically shake off the cape, staggering back to the microphone for an encore, often repeating the routine multiple times until the audience was completely exhausted and satisfied.
The source material is clear that this theatrical routine was directly inspired by the famous professional wrestler Gorgeous George,
whom Brown credited in his autobiography. It was also influenced by Little Richard's stage antics. He translated professional wrestling theatrics into the lexicon of soul music.
What's remarkable is that this external spectacle was only possible due to an internal system of extreme control and discipline that verged on the tyrannical.
Brown demanded perfection and precision from every single person in his massive band and revue.
This translated into a notoriously strict and immediate fine system for infractions. This wasn't just about music, it was about presenting a perfect image.
The band could be fined for things like unshined shoes, dancing out of sync, or being late on stage.
Imagine being an elite musician like Maceo Parker or Fred Wesley and worrying about the shine on your cummerbund or the polish of your shoes before every show.
Maceo Parker's account confirms the intense demands. You had to have the uniform, the bow tie, the cummerbund, and the shoes had to be greased. If you were fired, you had to leave the expensive costumes behind.
This is where we see that Toko prison discipline system fully manifest in his adult professional life. He controlled everything down to the movement of a pinky finger.
And the method he used to enforce this was ingenious, if terrifying for the band.
He enforced the fines in plain sight. Brown would often dance with his back to the audience, sliding across the floor and flashing hand signals with splayed fingers.
The audience thought it was part of the ecstatic act.
But these were silent signals. He was actually pointing to an offending band member, the drummer who missed a syncopation, the guitarist who played the wrong riff, the horn player who stepped out of line,
alerting them instantly to the fine they owed him after the set. It was surveillance embedded into the choreography.
That level of micromanagement suggests his control went beyond perfectionism and bordered on genuine professional intimidation, as noted by his longtime musical director, Fred Wesley.
Wesley recalled that Brown could be overtly hostile to support acts if he felt intimidated by them.
He would actively try to undermine their performance. This included demanding that they shorten their sets without notice, or specifically forbidding them from playing their most popular show-stopping songs.
And in a bizarre twist of ego, he would sometimes go so far as to jump onto the stage during their set and play drums on their songs himself.
Wesley noted this was a sure set killer, designed to disrupt the flow and energy of the support act and ensure Brown remained the singular, overwhelming focus of the night.
It speaks to an absolute refusal to share the spotlight.
And that intense, singular, and controlling energy directed at his musicians and competitors was the very same energy he channeled into social and political commentary. If we follow the trajectory of this energy, we see how it transitioned from music to civic engagement.
which often resulted in complex and contradictory political actions.
Let's start with education advocacy, which was deeply personal for him. Having been forced to drop out of school in the 7th grade for wearing insufficient clothes, Brown became a huge proponent of youth education.
He was always stressing the importance of staying in school.
And he backed this belief with action, releasing the song "Don't Be a Dropout" and donating the royalties entirely to charity programs focused on dropout prevention.
This philanthropic work led to a meeting with President Lyndon B. Johnson, who publicly cited Brown as a positive role model for young people.
And this wasn't a temporary stance. Brown maintained this philanthropic commitment throughout his life, including distributing toys and turkeys to children at an Atlanta orphanage just a week before his death.
And critically, his final wishes reflected this priority.
His 2002 will advised that the majority of his estate go toward creating the I Feel Good, Inc. trust to benefit disadvantaged children and provide scholarships for his grandchildren.
His final single, released toward the end of his life, Killing Is Out, School Is In, was another powerful piece of advocacy specifically against street violence.
However, when it came to the broader civil rights movement, Brown's path was initially cautious and pragmatic.
He was reluctant to discuss civil rights issues directly in his songs, fearing it would alienate his crucial white crossover audience he had worked so hard to cultivate.
He even released a pro-patriotism song in 1968, "America Is My Home," and performed for troops in Vietnam.
His message at the time was one of self-reliance. He famously told listeners to stop pitying yourselves and get up and fight.
But by the volatile summer of 1968, the pressure from black activists and the escalating tensions demanded a stronger, more explicit statement.
And this led to the creation of one of the most powerful and important anthems of the civil rights era. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud.
The source notes that he wrote the lyrics in response to footage he saw of black-on-black crime in inner cities, feeling compelled to promote internal community pride and unity.
It was an instant lightning rod. The song, which features the voices of children chanting the title voice, was co-written musically by his band leader Alfred Pee Wee Ellis. It was a massive cultural statement of affirmation at a crucial time.
But what's truly fascinating is Brown's later ambivalence about the song. Years later, in 1984, he stated that if he had a choice, he wouldn't have done it.
Believing that defining people by race fosters separatism.
Yet, in his autobiography, he acknowledged the necessity of the moment. He stated the song was required to teach pride then.
Even though he admitted that the record cost him a huge chunk of his crossover audience, noting that his concerts were overwhelmingly black afterward, the personal cost was high, but the cultural impact was undeniable.
This complex relationship with identity and politics resulted in his contradictory political views. He supported Democrats, including Hubert Humphrey, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Jimmy Carter.
But also Republicans, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan.
And it was his explicit support for Richard Nixon in 1972 that led to severe public and commercial backlash among his core audience.
It was catastrophic for his public image within many black communities. His endorsement of Nixon led directly to a widespread boycott of his records and concerts.
The sources report a show in Cincinnati in November 1972 was specifically picketed with signs calling him James Brown, Nixon's clown.
This wasn't just image damage. It had a financial toll. He lost a large portion of his black audience, and his record sales and concert attendance experienced a significant dip in the U.S. throughout 1973.
Brown, ever the pragmatist, eventually reversed his political endorsement.
Composing the self-deprecating track? You can have Watergate. Just give me some bucks and I'll be straight.
One of the most surprising details in this political chapter is his relationship with Reverend Al Sharpton.
Brown mentored the young activist during the 1970s, famously convincing him to drop Alfred and simply go by Al Sharpton.
And Sharpton served as his tour manager from 1973 to 1980. That mentorship continued into the political arena.
They even met with President Ronald Reagan in 1981 to advocate for the establishment of a national Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Sharpton later credited Brown with teaching him the power of spectacle and drama, even in activism, saying you have to be dramatic in order to get people to see things that they are not inclined to see.
And that power of spectacle was leveraged for a massive civic purpose following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968.
This is the remarkable story of the Boston Garden concert the very next day.
Following Dr. King's murder, violence erupted in cities across America. In Boston, the police chief wanted to immediately cancel Brown's scheduled concert at the Boston Garden on April 5, fearing the mass gathering would incite further violence.
Mayor Kevin White was in an impossible situation. Canceling the show might lead the frustrated youth onto the streets, while letting it proceed was a massive security risk.
So he took a bold political gamble. He arranged for Brown's concert to proceed, but negotiated to have it broadcast for free multiple times on Boston's public television station, WGBH.
The tactical goal was brilliant. Keep potential rioters off the streets by giving them a powerful, unified, and free cultural experience to focus on instead.
And Brown himself addressed the audience directly during the televised concert, urging them to respect Dr. King's nonviolent legacy and go home safely.
The plan worked. Order was maintained, and Boston avoided the riots seen in other major cities.
But the politics continued behind the scenes. Brown was, understandably, furious that the city had decided to broadcast his concert for free.
Meaning he would lose all the revenue from the ticket sales, the entire gate fees. He demanded $60,000 to cover the projected loss.
When the city, which was dealing with municipal chaos, initially balked at paying, Brown threatened to publicly expose the secret arrangement.
Which would have been a political disaster for Mayor White. The threat risked destroying the goodwill White had just earned and potentially igniting the riots they had just narrowly avoided.
So White was forced to use political maneuvering, lobbying a powerful, behind-the-scenes group of financial and political elites known in Boston as the Vault.
This group provided $100,000 for social programs and Brown's fee. Ultimately, Brown received $15,000 directly from the city, and White convinced the garden management to forfeit their share of the receipts to cover the rest.
It's a remarkable historical footnote. Music and performance were deployed as instruments of immediate political and civic stability, requiring incredibly complicated backroom deals to settle the artist's fee afterward.
The performance saved the city, but it was James Brown's business acumen that demanded he be compensated for his role. We must now pivot to the most challenging contradiction in James Brown's life.
The creative genius and force of nature we've detailed existed alongside deep, damaging personal behavior that resulted in real harm to those close to him.
And we approach this section with the necessary gravity, reporting the facts detailed in the sources while maintaining sympathy and respect for the individuals harmed by these actions.
The source material contains some very disturbing accounts, beginning with his relationship with the singer Tammy Terrell, who was only 17 years old when she joined the James Brown Revue in 1962.
She eventually terminated both their personal and professional ties due to documented abusive behavior.
Former members of the famous Flames corroborated these claims. Bobby Bennett, for instance, told Rolling Stone that he witnessed Brown severely beating Terrell, stating, "He beat Tammy Terrell terrible. She was bleeding, shedding blood."
The source also includes Bennett's claim that he saw Brown kick a pregnant girlfriend down a flight of stairs.
And his third marriage, to Adrienne Rodriguez, was marked by intense violence and became a consistent feature in the news.
Between 1987 and 1995, Brown was arrested 4 separate times on charges of assault against her.
The specific accusations documented in the source material are horrifying and detail long-term domestic violence. Rodriguez reported to authorities that Brown beat her with an iron pipe and that he shot at her car during one incident.
Tragically, charges related to these incidents were eventually dropped after her death in 1996.
This pattern of behavior continued into his later relationships. In 2004, Brown was arrested on a domestic violence charge after his partner, Tommy Ray Heine, accused him of pushing her to the floor, causing scratches and bruises.
In this instance, he pleaded no contest and forfeited a bond. The severity and recurrence of these incidents are a stark contrast to the positive public image he often cultivated.
And what makes this even more paradoxical is his stance on substance abuse within his professional orbit.
For the majority of his career, Brown enforced an absolutely strict, no-tolerance, drug and alcohol-free policy for everyone in his entourage.
That's correct. He fired early famous Flames members for alcohol use, and in one infamous incident, he dismissed the Essential Rhythm section, Bootsy and Catfish Collins, from the JBs in 1971.
Because he suspected them of being under the influence of drugs after they admitted taking LSD during a performance. Discipline was sacrosanct.
Yet, the source material alleges that later in his life, Brown himself became involved with drugs, creating a brutal irony for the ultimate disciplinarian.
The allegations point toward the use of PCP, or angel dust, potentially starting before 1982, and later cocaine, sometimes consumed mixed with tobacco in cool cigarettes.
These periods of alleged drug usage unfortunately coincided directly with his most violent and erratic public behavior and subsequent arrests.
The incident that perhaps most damaged his reputation and led to prison time was the September 1988 high-speed car chase on Interstate 20 near the Georgia-South Carolina border.
Following the chase, Brown was convicted of carrying an unlicensed pistol, assaulting a police officer, and various drug and driving offenses. He received a 6-year sentence, though he was paroled after serving 2 years until 1991.
It was a chaotic and deeply troubled period.
Interestingly, Brown later offered a counter-narrative detailed in his FBI file, which was released years afterward.
He claimed the high-speed chase was actually an incident of targeted police harassment, alleging that local police shot at his car several times and assaulted him after his arrest.
However, local authorities found no merit in these counter-accusations.
And sadly, the shadow of substance abuse continued to the end. The sources confirmed that traces of cocaine were found in his urine when he was admitted to the hospital just prior to his death in December 2006.
Beyond domestic issues and drug-related incidents, his legal battles stretch back decades, highlighting a long history of aggressive behavior.
We should briefly touch on the 1963 Macon incident at Club 15.
The account is shocking. Brown reportedly wielded 2 shotguns and attempted to shoot his musical rival, Joe Tex. The resulting chaos led to multiple people being shot and stabbed.
And because Brown was still on parole from Toco, he took extreme measures to make the situation disappear, paying off the injured parties and ultimately avoiding charges.
There were also civil suits from former employees alleging inappropriate behavior and demands. In the case filed by Lisa Agbalaya, while Brown was cleared of sexual harassment, the jury did find him liable for wrongful termination,
noting specific, bizarre, and unacceptable demands made of her in the workplace.
And we must report on the 2005 lawsuit filed by Jacques Hollander, stemming from an alleged 1988 rape. Hollander claimed Brown threatened her with a shotgun and sexually assaulted her.
And it is important to state clearly, based on the source material, that the case was ultimately dismissed because the limitations period, or statute of limitations, for filing the suit had expired.
If the personal life was complex, the conclusion of his life was perhaps the most convoluted legal mess of all time.
The legal battle over his estate lasted for 15 years after his death.
Brown's final will, signed in 2000, was clear. It named his 6 adult living children as beneficiaries, but pointedly omitted both Tommy Ray Heine, who is his partner at the time of his death, and James Jr., who was born later.
The entire conflict centered on Heine's legal status as his widow.
Her legal status was deeply complicated by a prior marriage. Heine had been married to a man from Bangladesh named Javed Ahmed, which she claimed was solely for the purpose of helping him secure a green card. She stated this marriage was annulled.
However, the timeline created an immediate legal knot. Her wedding ceremony with Brown took place in 2002, but the annulment of her first marriage did not occur until April 2004.
So Brown's attorneys argued the marriage to Brown was invalid because she was already legally married to another man at the time of the 2002 ceremony.
The source notes that Brown himself was reportedly angry that she had concealed the prior marriage and filed for an annulment himself.
The court conflict was relentless, lasting until 2020. That year, the South Carolina Supreme Court definitively ruled that Heine was not legally married to Brown and therefore had no right to his estate under state law.
This ruling finally paved the way for the family to reach a comprehensive settlement in 2021, 15 years after his death.
Allowing the charitable trust Brown intended to benefit disadvantaged children and provide scholarships to finally begin operating. It was a long, bitter, and highly public legal conclusion to an extraordinarily complex personal life.
Despite the declining chart dominance in the late 70s and 80s, partially attributed to the rise of disco, which superseded his raw funk style, James Brown never stopped working.
He maintained a grueling touring schedule well into the final years of his life, truly living up to that nickname, the hardest working man in show business.
And his career saw an incredible resurgence, not just through tireless touring, but through the genre he fathered, hip-hop.
This new generation of artists resurrected his rhythmic core. This really started with Africa Bambaataa Unity in 1984, which prominently featured his loops.
This propelled him back into the mainstream spotlight. He recorded his final top 10 pop hit, Living in America, which was featured prominently in the massively popular film Rocky V in 1986.
That track reintroduced his powerful, charismatic stage persona to a global, young audience.
And we circle back, yet again, to the rhythmic innovations of the late 60s. The drum break from the second version of Give It Up or Turn It to Loose became so popular and so foundational at early hip-hop dance parties.
That pioneers like Curtis Blow called it the national anthem of hip-hop.
His status as the rhythmic blueprint was undeniable, prompting collaborations and tributes from countless artists, including MC Hammer, who frequently cited Brown as his idol.
Brown's ability to create a loopable, powerful, stripped-down groove made him immortal in the digital age.
He continued performing and maintaining his iconic status well into his final years, often commanding massive stages. He performed at major events like the Super Bowl XXY halftime show in 1997.
And in one of his final concert appearances, his performance at the Irish Oxygen Festival in 2006 drew a record crowd of 80,000 people.
It proved his universal appeal never waned, even as his health began to fail.
Let's detail his final days, which were surprisingly abrupt given his constant activity. On December 23, 2006, Brown was scheduled for dental work in Atlanta, but arrived late looking very bad, weak and dazed.
His dentist, recognizing the severity of his condition, strongly advised him to see a physician immediately.
Following that advice, he was admitted to Emory Crawford Long Memorial Hospital the next day for pneumonia, which had complicated a cough he had struggled with since November.
His manager, Bobbitt, noted Brown had a history of performing while ill, but that even then Brown was confident he would be discharged in time for his scheduled New Year's Eve shows.
Tragically, that was not to be. James Brown died on Christmas Day, 2006, at age 73, from congestive heart failure resulting from complications of pneumonia.
His manager, Bobbitt, who was at his bedside, reported Brown's final, quiet words, "I'm going away tonight."
The memorials were as spectacular and intense as his life. Elaborate public services were held, first at the Apollo Theater in New York and then at the James Brown Arena in his hometown of Augusta, Georgia.
Reverend Al Sharpton, his former tour manager and protege, officiated all the public and private services.
The pageantry was immense. His body, encased in a bronze Promethean casket, the most expensive model available, was driven through the streets of New York to the Apollo.
In a white, glass-encased, horse-drawn carriage.
In Augusta, the procession stopped at his life-sized bronze statue before heading to the arena, where his final backup band, the Soul Generals, performed a rousing tribute.
Michael Jackson, Prince, and other stars attended to pay their final respects to the man who truly influenced all of them.
His immortal status is cemented not only in music but in public memory and physical monuments. He was one of the first inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986.
Though his essential original vocal group, the Famous Flames, were retroactively inducted in 2012, he also received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1992 and the Kennedy Center Honors in 2003.
His legacy is fiercely protected and celebrated in Augusta, Georgia, where a section of 9th Street was renamed James Brown Boulevard in 1993. The city unveiled the life-sized bronze statue in 2005.
And the city's Civic Center was renamed the James Brown Arena in 2006. The city even briefly used the slogan, "We feel good."
To capture the essence of his singular impact, we have some remarkable perspectives from fellow artists. Rick Rubin, the renowned producer, called Brown his own genre.
Rubin praised Brown not just as a creator, but as a great editor, stating that Brown kept things sparse and fundamentally understood that the music always came from the groove.
Unlike conventional R&B artists of the time who relied on complex arrangements, Brown focused relentlessly on minimizing everything but the rhythm.
That brutal editing allowed that unique, raw, funky sound to define itself globally.
And the legendary Tom Waits described the experience of seeing Brown live in 1962 as indescribable. It was like putting a finger in a light socket.
He added, "It was really like seeing Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Christmas." That comparison speaks to the spiritual, ecstatic, almost religious experience that his high-intensity performance delivered.
What stands out here is that James Brown didn't just create a style. He established a new physical law of music, setting the rhythmic foundation for global popular culture that still dominates radio and dance floors today.
As we conclude this exploration, the portrait of James Brown that emerges is defined by irreconcilable contrasts.
He was the musical innovator who invented folk, the relentless disciplinarian band leader who demanded absolute perfection, and the fierce advocate for education and Black self-reliance.
Yet he was also the deeply flawed man whose personal struggles manifested in violent, abusive, and complex legal challenges, issues that often reflected the sheer, raw intensity of his artistic fire.
His political life was equally contradictory, publicly supporting a divisive Republican president while simultaneously releasing the era's most potent anthem of Black pride.
We are left with this question about his enduring cultural impact. We must consider how an artist whose personal life contains such profound moral and personal conflict, a life born out of chaos and ruled by tyrannical control, could create music universally recognized as the rhythmic foundation for global popular culture.
How did his particular brand of internal chaos produce the DNA for dance music and the national anthem of hip-hop, fundamentally changing the way the world listens and moves?
That tension, that unrelenting push and pull between his past, his discipline, and his contradictions, is perhaps what gave his music its raw, unfiltered survivalist power.
It was music forged in the extremes of the human experience.
Thank you for joining us for this analysis of the life of James Joseph Brown.
Thanks for listening.